What's up YouTube? How are you guys doing? So today I wanted to show you how you can massively increase and assess and test the quality of your AI agent, and if he is using a RAG knowledge base, right? So something that you would basically plug into your specific AI agent so that you can give it internal knowledge of your company or whatever, and how well it actually answers a specific question which can be answered using that internal knowledge base, right? And we are going to go through this very simple flow, as you can see, and I'm going to explain everything one by one. So before we do this, I have prepared an Airtable for this, and by the way, you will get all the assets that I'm showing you here, like the flow, the prompts, and also the template for those tables in my community, which is still free at the time of this recording, and I'm happy to share all of this in the description. As you can see, we have this table, right? So this is the one that we are going to use, and let's quickly go through this. So we have a reg ID, then we have a question which will be prepared by us manually, obviously. So this is something that could, come from real life data or something that we can basically simulate or mimic. Then we have an expected answer, and this is obviously something that you would have to write manually as well. So what would be like the perfect answer to answer this specific question? Then we have a couple of must include keywords, something that we would expect the agent to use within his answer. And then we have an answer field, which is the response of our agent. Then we have a score, which we will calculate, and I'm going to show you how exactly this works. Then we have a pass field, which is just a binary field, which will give us a true or a false value. And then we have a couple of missing keywords, which might be missing from the answer that the agent has created, right? And this will give us a very simple but also very powerful way of assessing how well the agent works by just giving us a binary result, how well the agent and the LLM performed, right? And let's quickly jump into the flow itself. So what we are doing is that we are going to start the flow with a manual trigger. Then I am going to use the search records node from Airtable itself, and this is connected to my Airtable account. The resource is a record. We are doing an operation of a search. The base that I'm using is called demo, and the table is called reg eval, and this is exactly what we have here, right? And the only filter that I'm using is that I want the column called pass to be empty, right? So this way I can be sure that if I have a couple of 100 questions prepared and we are doing a couple of runs, that the ones that are already done, which are already passed or failed, will not be tested again. And this is the only filter that I'm using, and I'm going to get a couple of records out of Airtable. Now the next step is to use our agent, and the agent has as the source for the prompt as a static prompt, which I have defined here. I am starting out with a system message, and if you don't see this option, then you can activate it in this drop down here. You will see system message, and then this little input field will be available to you, and it's a very short system message. I'm just telling it you are an operations assistant answer using only the provided context. You must use your Pinecone vector store, and I'm going to get to this in a second, tool to answer the question. If context does not contain the answer, say not in docs, right? And the only prompt after this is that this is the question, and this is the question that I have pulled out of Airtable, which is this column right here. I'm going to close this, and I have equipped my agent with a chat model, obviously, and I'm using GPT-5 mini, and you can test this out, obviously. And this is also, of course, one of the reasons we are doing this. If you see that there are some models who perform better, then you would obviously change this, right? Now, the tool that I'm using is a Pinecone vector store, right? And if you don't know what that is, then if you click on tools, and I'm going to collapse all of these sections right here, then you see that we have access to multiple vector stores from multiple providers, and the one that I'm using is from Pinecone. You don't have to use this. You might use something like Supabase or something like MongoDB or Postgres. That's totally up to you. Pinecone is just a little easier to understand for our context that I'm using this one. And the dashboard of Pinecone looks like this. So I'm now within the Pinecone database, if you will, which contains a couple of records, as you can see, and all of these contain a text chunk, right, which in itself stems from this source right here. So this is a document I have used in the past just as a sample, and this is just a customer service guideline from a fictional company called Script Manufacturing Limited, and this could be a document which we want to use as the source, right, for the agent to take his knowledge out of and to answer with, right? Because these are all the rules that we have identified as a company. All right, so this is the source, and I have converted this into a vector store. And if you, by the way, want to learn how you can do this, then jump into my community, and you will learn how to convert this into a vector store easily. All right, let's jump back into the end-to-end flow. And so, as I've mentioned, we are now connected to the Pinecone vector store. I'm going to open up this node. And as you can see, this is connected to my account. The operation is we want to retrieve documents, and the description, which is quite important. So this is not just an internal description for us so that we know how the tool works, but this is actually for the agent itself. So especially if they have multiple tools, then I would highly advise you to use this description. And it also says here, explain to the LLM what this tool does. A good specific description would allow LLMs to produce expected results much more often, right? So do use this and explain what this tool does. So in this case, it's retrieve information from the script manufacturing guideline via this Pinecone vector store. Then I am using a dropdown. So I'm selecting the Pinecone from the Pinecone index, exactly the database that we have right here, right? So this is the database that I'm using. It has just a couple of records, 16. So the whole document that you have just seen splits into 16 different records. Back in N8N, I'm going to limit this, and I am going to include the metadata, and that's already it, right? The model itself, or rather the vector store itself, is again connected to an embedding model that you have to choose as well. So I'm going to close this, I'm going to disconnect this, and if I'm selecting the embedding model again, then again you can see that there are multiple embedding models. I'm just using my personal default embedding model from OpenAI, and if I have connected this and I'm going to open this up, then again this is connected to my OpenAI account, and this is the model that I'm using. And I am defining the dimensions to 1024. All right, so this is already it. And let's see what the next node does, which is a code node, right? And I'm going to walk you through this. So we are using a code node for this, and the mode is to run once for each item. Then we have JavaScript as the language, and then we have this very short code snippet, but which will be very helpful for our case. So I'm going to open this up in a bigger view, and let's just quickly walk through all of this. So this might look a little intimidating to you, but as I've mentioned, I'm first of all going to share all of this with you, and then second of all, it's not that complicated what this code does. So the first thing is that it takes the must-have keywords and saves them into a variable, right? After this, it's going to take the model's answer, right, the agent's answer, and it's going to save this as well. And then after this, it's going to check how many of those keywords that must be included are actually within that answer, right? Within the response of the LLM. After this, we are just calculating a score, and we are then outputting the pass score of 75. So I am defining this with a score of 75. So if there is a match of 75%, then I am going to allow this to pass the test basically and tell it, all right, this is a pass. And after this, I'm just going to list all the missing keywords. So I'm just counting the ones that are not included in this, and then I'm outputting this so that I can later use this within Airtable, and I know exactly what has been missing. So as you can see, this is quite easy to understand actually, and obviously you can get into more depth with ChatGPT and have this explain this to you. All right, I'm going to close this again. And after this, we are already at the very last node, which is just to update the record again, right? So I'm going to open this up. This is again connected to my account. The resource is a record. I want to update a record. The base and the table are obviously the same. I'm going to map each column manually, and the column to match on is the ID, the record ID of Airtable itself. And if you don't know, so there's an internal record ID, right? And they always start with REC so that you can easily identify them. And I'm going to use the ID to match this from the previous node, from the search records node, right? And then we actually are just inputting the answer from our RAG agent right in here. Then we are using the score and the pass and the missing keywords from the previous code node, right? And that's already it. So let's see how this works. And before we're going to take a look at the results, I would be extremely grateful if you took a second and subscribed to this channel, first of all, and then liked and shared this video if this was helpful to you. And then again, I am building Script AI School. So this is my school community where you will learn everything there is in regards to AI and automations, especially if you are working in the operations field, right? So I'm going to into the N8N basics. So if you have never heard of N8N before, then I will definitely teach you how you can start from scratch. I'm sharing all of the essence, just as I've just mentioned, within this community. So everything you see here, the N8N flows, the prompts, the code notes, and everything else. Then we will get into AI agents. We will get into RAG even more and even more technical on a technical level, so that you will be really highly equipped to jump to the next level in regards to AI and automations. All right, so then let's see how the whole flow works. I have just prepared this, and I'm just going to run this, and let's just see what happens. All right, and the whole flow is done right now. I did have a couple of problems with this because it ran about a minute, and then I realized that in the very last note, and by the way, I'm in the executions tab right now, in the very last note, that I accidentally had the rag ID to be filled out or populated, and it was empty, and this is actually one of those fields that can't be empty, right? So if I define a so-called auto number within Airtable, then this field can't be empty because it has to have an ID. So this is the reason why it failed before. All right, no problem. I ran it again and then added the responses and everything else into the table itself. All right, so let's jump into the results actually, and let's take a look at what happened. So this is the answer we got for this specific question, right? And again, this should be or the agent should be able to respond to this using this very document, right? Which we have again converted into this vector store. But we can already see that most of the time it failed, right? Because it didn't match the least amount of missing or of keywords that we want to include in the response, right? So for instance, in this one, we have a missing keyword decision table. This is the one that we would have expected the agent to use, right? But he only took intake and triage, for instance. So it got a score of 0.7. But as you remember, we want to have at least 0.75, right? This one was quite nice. No missing keywords whatsoever. And all of the other ones were not successful. Even with this one, it didn't even find the correct answer in the docs, right? All right. So as you can see, this is a very simple way, but an effective way to test the output of your agent. And obviously, this is just the beginning, right? You can get really detailed into this, but for the sake of not over analyzing and getting into analysis paralysis, this can be a very good starting point for you to increase the quality of your agent. And by the way, if you're thinking right now, hold on, there is actually an evaluations tab within n8n itself, then yes, that's definitely true. However, this is a little more complex, and I wanted to make it as simple as possible and to give us a little result, or to rather, give us some result as fast as possible. Evaluations aren't that easy to understand, but we will also get into that topic within the community. And this is now n8n agnostic, if you will, right? Because you can build a system like this, obviously, wherever you would like. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks a lot for your attention, and see you next time. Bye.